Okay, so Joanne Chase is a citizen of the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara tribes, and was born and raised on the Fort Berthold Indian Reservation in central North Dakota. In 2010, Joanne served as senior advisor to the administrator of the EPA for Native American Affairs. Most recently, Joanne has partnered with music icon Nona Hendricks and social justice innovator Makani Themba to launch Sisters Matter.org, focused predominantly on providing opportunity for young women of color. Sisters Matter, science, math, art, technology, robotics, leverages art and community to close the gender gap in science and technology. So with that, we have Joanne as one of our presenters. Thank you, Joanne.
Hey, thank you so much, Lane. And it's just, it's great to be back here. I did have the wonderful opportunity to serve in the Obama administration, and then took some time to do great work at the intersection of art and social justice. And then was just absolutely honored and delighted when I was asked to return to the same position with the Biden administration for a whole lot of reasons. And largely because I certainly believe in this president's commitment to advancing the nation-to-nation relationship and really fulfilling and honoring our trust obligations. And importantly, it was an opportunity for me to reconnect with Jane. We worked very closely together during the Obama years, and it's just wonderful that she is in the AA position for the Office of International and Tribal Affairs. And so, as we say, we're committed to getting in the spirit of the great John Lewis in good trouble together, and share just a mutual commitment to put forth 110% of our effort to take advantage of this opportunity that we have to really continue to move along and advance the issues that we were able to take up during the Obama years in partnership with you, and now with renewed vigor and renewed energy. Really, again, work together to move forward and to ensure that the tribes have the resources, particularly as we work in the larger environmental field, to really address the needs of tribal citizens and to protect the environment and to protect human health, and again, to really work in partnership with you. So thank you for the honor of being able to return and being able to work in this position. So as Jane mentioned, from day one, this administration just really hit the decks running on with the tribes. And Jane kind of highlighted some of those big overarching issues. Just a footnote, Jane talked about the international work, and the White House Council on Native American Affairs was really born under the Obama administration. Of course, lied pretty dormant during the previous administration, is now being stood up again with, just new vigor and new energy. And it's really just very exciting to have Secretary Deb Haaland co-chairing that. And one of the additions to the ongoing work of the previous 5 committees was this addition of an international committee. And so it's a great opportunity for us, a really important a vehicle to continue to address these transboundary issues. And I just think we're all so well served to have Jane personally committed to be in that leadership position, to use her experience both internationally and among the tribes to continue to advocate for the tribal issues, bring them to the forefront, and do the great work that she's doing. So, I'm so delighted that we have this 6th committee, and that OIDA on behalf of EPA is really able to provide some leadership in that, and that Jane in particular is bringing her expertise to it. So, that is definitely worth noting, and that work will continue, and it is indeed incredibly critical. So, against the backdrop of these bigger priorities, we just sat back down and said, all right, here we are in the Office of International and Tribal Affairs, specifically the American Indian Environmental Office. There's so much, right? There's so many priorities, but what are some of the key things that we can really focus on? And so it doesn't mean that every day there aren't additional issues to these, but these are among the priority issues that I wanted to share with you. And of course, it includes consultation. And when I came on early on in the Obama days, I was really proud of EPA and happy to be associated with a member of the federal family that was showing leadership in what meaningful consultation with tribes can be. We were, I like to say we were the first. It's dangerous to say that, so I'll say we were among the first federal agencies to be forthcoming with a consultation policy. And it was a good policy, right? And even at the end of the tenure, we were able to add to that policy a guidance on treaty rights, again, kind of paving the way as an example for the federal family. When this administration took office, right away, President Biden said, consultation is critical. And what we need to do is we need to go back out. We need to see how we're doing. So we went out right away for consultation on our consultation policy. We know it seems like it is a lot, not seems like a lot. It's a lot on all of your plates. We're just one agency among many of the federal family. So, tribal leadership has piles and piles of consultation issues on their desks, but nonetheless, it is the cornerstone of our engagement, our government to government relationship. And so it was a really great opportunity for us to hear back from you. We think we're doing some things well, but nothing is ever so good that it can't be better. And we're so committed to trying to ensure that how we engage in consultation really is meaningful. And it's particularly challenging during these times where we're sort of relegated to this kind of technological connection as opposed to in-person connections. There's resource limitations as well. So it is not perfect, but we strive to make it the best and to honor the integrity of what it is meant to be. So consultation continues to be a priority for us. We took all the comments that folks shared with us. We are continuing to work on improving our consultation policy in accordance with President Biden's executive order. And that remains, again, a priority of our office as we strive to incorporate what we have heard from the tribes. And again, make sure that our process is robust, is inclusive, and truly does honor our obligation to the partnership and our obligation to advancing the nation-to-nation relationship with tribal governments. So that's one issue, consultation. This also gave us a chance to look at direct implementation, which I think is a huge issue for the agency. We do have really important DI responsibilities. We have engaged, prior to me rejoining the administration, there were some comprehensive efforts in terms of collecting data inside so that we can really have a better picture of what we're doing, how we're doing it, where we need to get better, again, how we can fulfill those obligations. And so that's been very, very important to us. Also, just to make sure that, the protection that we are providing to tribes is on par with the protection that's provided to, say, states and other entities, so that there really is, that protection is equitable, and that in addition to that, that we are, that we are really doing the best job that we can in terms of ensuring that we have the whole picture. We are doing, that hardcore self-assessment internally and finding those spaces and places where we know there's room for improvement. And then again, ensuring that we are advocating that the direct implementation efforts for tribes are on par with every other government that we work with and serve. So that continues to be a priority and an ongoing issue for us. And we will be engaging with you, and obviously the tribe's input in this is really important as well. So look to keep hearing from us as we move forward with our direct implementation efforts. Jane mentioned climate adaptation and resilience. So of course, enhancing the adaptation and resilience of tribal nations and communities affected by, we call it climate change. I think now we can really call it climate crisis, and addressing transboundary pollution issues that are impacting tribal nations and their communities and their citizens continues to be a priority. There's a lot of moving parts there. And so, our commitment is really to work with tribes. We have compelled now regional adaptation plans, office adaptation plans. How do we streamline those, make those most accessible, have the kind of communication with tribes, and provide the kinds of resources that don't add to the administrative burden, but rather add to our capacity collectively, and the tribe's capacity also to confront the climate crisis And so that is another big issue for us. I want to add on the traditional ecological knowledge is there's just been a lot of attention. There's been now a presidential memorandum on this across the federal family. I just want to give a shout out to Winona Wilson from Region 10, who is helping to coordinate the agency-wide efforts to address and incorporate traditional ecological knowledge. She's not just a colleague; she's really a sister, and we're all so well served to have Winona in this position to help guide us in a good way. Sometimes, with the best of intentions, federal agencies get involved in some of these issues that have tremendous sensitivity, and there are cultural protocols, and they're not intentionally ignored, but they're not always considered in the appropriate way. And so I think those mistakes have been taken to heart in the past, and now Winona helping to guide us in our efforts. This gives us a unique opportunity to really institutionalize when and where appropriate, as deemed by the tribes, the consideration of traditional ecological knowledge into our decision making. I mean, that's just that's huge, and there's so much as stewards of the land since time immemorial. There's so much wisdom to be able to share, and to have that possibly be part of again, where appropriate, our decision making and informing the work that we're doing. I think is just a tremendous asset to our efforts collectively. So that is a priority for us. And again, what a privilege to be working with somebody like Winona to help lead these efforts across the entire agency and ultimately across the federal family. And frankly, even into the international arena through the Commission on Environmental Cooperation, the CEC, which involves Canada, Mexico, and the United States. So a huge opportunity to advance TEK, and that will remain, our priority as well. And then finally, the biggie in the room, and I know that this will be a subject for more conversation later, and I'm so glad that we are going to be able to do that in a deeper session as the week goes on here with Lisa Barrios on my staff and her fine crew who will address our gap issues. When I first came on board during the Obama years, we were in the early stages of revising the gap guidance. And I had, frankly, I had no idea what I was getting into. And I learned a tremendous amount. The territory was incredibly complicated. And the goal has remained the same, really, which is to optimize the program, to increase the flexibilities within GAP, to work in partnership with the tribes so that these resources, the maximum amount of resources are going directly to the tribes. The tribes have the maximum amount of flexibility to work with them. But along the way, it has meant, that we do have a guidance and that we are in the process of revising that guidance. We have are building a GAP hub in terms of how we track and report use of GAP dollars. So there's some national consistency in all of this. And I'm excited. I actually think the GAP Hub is going to be a tremendous resource. I think we're making through your help over the years. And as we go now out again into consultation, that we will we'll move forward with a finalized version of a GAP guidance that really does have the clarity and the guidance that is necessary. And we're doing that in the spirit of transparency. And it doesn't mean there hasn't been difficult conversations, and there won't be some, continued back and forth. But I think that's what makes for an end product. We don't come to this with a sense of being prescriptive by any means. Really, there's a fundamental commitment to, again, working in partnership with tribes to ensure that we arrive in the place that's that ultimately is, again, the best for the tribes. And so one of those issues, that's out for discussion, again, I'm really looking forward to a deeper dive into this, is the GAP allocation formula. I know it's just, we'll put it straight out there. This has been an issue that has, there are a variety of opinions and thoughts and ideas across the country. And I know this is a super important issue for Region 10. And so again, our commitment is to a process of transparency. We've had the opportunity to have, I want to say information sessions, if you will, exchange opportunities at a broader level. We've had a series of one-on-one consultations with a number of the tribes in the area. And again, we look forward to addressing, questions, answering concerns. And I really believe at the end of the day, dispelling some of the concerns that you really have, and being able to explain and sit down and really come to a mutual understanding. And I'm very hopeful, and I say this with all sincerity, very hopeful and really believe that that we will end in a place that we all feel good about, right? And so there's changes that are being proposed for sure, but again, they're not being done, behind any walls in secret. We are committed to this process of transparency. We're committed to our continued engagement with the tribes. Certainly, we have ongoing conversations with the region, with both staff and management as we move forward and address this issue. So, GAP continues to be a priority as the program, but I also just want you to assure you, and again, be able to answer any questions, whether it's today in our deeper session later in the week, or always, to pick up the phone and give a call. We're committed to making ourselves available and having these conversations. But the process, right? It's not just the end result. It's also a process. And so ensuring that process is a process of integrity, that is a process that's inclusive, and that it's a process that's transparent, that Jane, this administration certainly remain absolutely committed to ensuring the integrity of the process, as well as a result that really maximizes those resources and opportunities for the tribes. So I don't know if Lisa's on today, but again, I know later in the week, I don't know exactly when it's on the schedule, but I'm sure most of you do, to have that deeper conversation. And we look forward to that, really and truly, to embracing that and continuing to move forward together. Jane mentioned that we are the EPA serves as the co-lead on the Climate Change, Tribal Homelands, and Treaties Committee of the White House Council on Native American Affairs. And so us, along with our federal partners, have been working. I mentioned the climate adaptation inventory as part of our work on the committee, and actually uniquely so, and I think very importantly and appropriately so, advising the White House Council on Environmental Quality on the inclusion of tribal treaty and reserved rights in the federal agency climate adaptation plans. This is a federal family-wide effort. CEQ is working to help coordinate that, and that we have a role in ensuring the inclusion of the tribal issues and tribal concerns is incredibly important, and we take that responsibility very seriously as well, and look forward to continuing to work with CEQ and work with all of you as we confront these huge challenges of the climate crisis. And so we hosted, in that spirit, we actually hosted some tribal engagements earlier this year. Actually, I guess this year. It would be last year. It would be in the fall, to really learn more about the tribal climate adaptation needs and priorities. And I think we all anticipated some robust participation in that, but that for both of those sessions we had, at times in those discussions, over 100 participants, which just really underscores the importance of this issue. And so now that information that we learned through those two sessions, as well as some ongoing engagements, is being really used to guide the development of our regional program climate adaptation implementation plans. And we're going to look forward to having further engagement with you on these draft plans as the summer comes to us, and that will be a very important next step in our efforts to address these needs. And then along with the White House Council on Native American Affairs is the White House Tribal Leaders Summit, which was held in November. And one of the deliverables there, Jane made mention to our tribal treaty rights memorandum of understanding. And at the very end of the Obama administration, we were able to throw sort of a Hail Mary pass, right? And score a touchdown with 9 agencies signing on. And then we were able now to come back because that MOU was up for renewal and actually add and make much more robust the original memorandum of understanding. And so it is indeed that it was revised early on. And then we went out to the federal agencies and aggressively looked for additional signatories. And so we have 17 members of the federal family signed on to this MOU. Jane will sort of laugh with me, I think, including the State Department. I was like, oh my gosh, Jane, the State Department just signed on. So I think it's a real indicator of this administration's leadership, the commitment over all, as it emanates from the president, down to the various federal agencies, down to the offices, including ours. But clearly, it's to me very exciting and very important and very timely and very necessary to see this movement and actual real work and structure on tribal treaty rights. And just a hats off to some of the tribes in the Northwest. Treaty rights are important for tribes across this nation for sure. But over the years, a number of the Northwest tribes were unrelenting in their, and I think of, the great leader and a dear friend and mentor, Billy Frank, who constantly reminded us of the importance of treaty rights and pushed us in that direction. So the leadership coming out of Region 10 and the Northwest area tribes is just deeply appreciated. And we've continued to build on that foundation. We also signed on, and I'm personally just thrilled about this. Not that my personal opinion matters necessarily, but just as an Indigenous person, it to me is really important that the Environmental Protection Agency at long last has signed on to the Sacred Sites MOU that exists among the federal family, as have additional members of the federal family. And toward that end, one of the commitments of the White House, besides the Tribal Nations Summit, has been to now host a series of tribal engagements. Again, not a perfect model, but an opportunity to be more inclusive, to give a deeper dive on some of the critical and key issues, and to give tribal leadership an opportunity to ask more questions of members of the federal family in real time and have those questions addressed, and then have opportunities for follow-up with more expansive answers and information. And so Jane and I will be participating next week in a tribal engagement session sponsored by the White House that involves the Sacred Sites MOU. And we're really, really very much looking forward to that. And then also just to mention that resources are resources. And anytime we get to announce the addition of resources, to me is a good day. And so in partnership with our Office of Environmental Justice, we'll be soon announcing a one-time $1.6 million competitive funding opportunity. That announcement should be coming this spring. Thank goodness we're getting closer and closer to spring. And so this opportunity is made available under the American Rescue Plan, or ARP, as we refer to it, for federally recognized tribes. And so just some parameters here. The focus will be on tribes establishing or modifying public participation programs impacted by COVID-19. And so as ARP funding, and again, the parameters of this, the proposals must address activities authorized by Section 103B of the Clean Air Act and or Section 1442C3 of the Safe Drinking Water Act. And so there'll be, again, more information forthcoming. That's right, hopefully just weeks away as the spring comes to us, and an opportunity again for some resources through the American Rescue Plan. So those are some of the key highlights. Again, you know, those are just, I mean, there's 100 more issues to talk about. But just wanted to share with you some of the priorities on our plate, and our commitment, and to continuing to work with you, to continuing to work with you know, our partners in the region, and you know, the regional staff. I mean, we are definitely one EPA, and headquarters, you know, certainly could never do it alone. And it is where the rubber meets the road, the work every day that our colleagues and friends and family in the region are doing, the amazing work that they're doing. So just again, hats off to the folks in Region 10 and the excellent work that they're doing. Thank you for the continued privilege of being able to work with you. You know, the tribal environmental leaders play such a critical role in addressing the needs of our tribal citizens. And it is really, you know, an honor and a privilege to be back in this position. And I look forward to, you know, answering questions, continuing our dialogue. And then again, around the gap issue, which I know is of concern, and of which there are unanswered questions. We want to leave no stone unturned, make sure we are addressing your questions. So whether it's today in our session, later in the week, where Lisa and our fine staff doing this work are going to, you know, really do a deeper dive, or anytime thereafter. You know, the phone number is open, the email is open, and you know, I look forward to, and I think I could speak on behalf of our staff to just continued engagement with you. So with that, I'll bring it to a close. And again, just my sincere and humble gratitude to have this opportunity to continue to work with you.
Ms. Cheese, thank you, Joanne. Thank you, Jane.
Hey,
We
Randy.
are a bit ahead of schedule, and I wanted to see if you guys would be able to stay on to field some questions from the audience.
Sure.
Awesome. Noticed there was one question from Ignacio Deret. Are Alaska tribes eligible for ARPA funds? If not, are regional corporations? Regional ANCSA corporations, pardon me.
For ARP funds?
ARPA funds, yes.
Yes. And so Jane, do you want to, I think Lisa may be on the phone too. She's been part of our ARP expert here, but I don't want to answer incorrectly. So I know, Jane, you may have a comment, but I see Lisa's joined us as well, and can probably provide a more accurate, absolute answer to that question than can I, Raymond. So
it's my understanding that they are, but again,
yes, I
we'll
believe
turn
so.
to our expert, Lisa.
Yes, Lisa. Lisa's been deemed an expert in multiple issues. So thank you, Lisa, for stepping up for that.
Got it. Sorry. Take me out of Teams and put me in Zoom and I'm lost. But under the ARP, there are a number of different grant opportunities. And I can't speak to the eligibility for all of those. At least 50 million of the ARP funds were for EJ work. And so I'm confident that tribes are eligible for the EJ work, including the Alaska tribes. And then I am 100% certain, I can say with certainty, that the 1.6 million that Joanne talked about specifically is federally recognized tribes, and that does include Alaska tribes.
Thank you, guys. There's also a comment in the chat. Nathan states that new guidance is great, but what we really need is increased funding. It's been far too long. Great comment, Nathan. And if I may lead into a question, I don't see anyone else jumping in right now. But first, I'd like to acknowledge the consultation that we had a few weeks ago at Tlingit and Haida. Thank you guys for that. With that though, and you guys heard our position at Tlingit and Haida and the tribes. And I kind of feel that this is, even as Nathan says, what we need is more funding. But I think in this allocation and this gap guidance process, I feel it's kind of at a bad time, and it's kind of rushed. And I know that I think there was progressive steps in taking to address this, such as the opportunity to work with the tribes to help design out. I know that that was offered back in the fall, but I feel not everyone was up to speed on what it really meant, and the capacity behind it wasn't there. As you guys know, with this current administration right now, the Biden administration is a progressive, or is in progressive development of tribal relations. And we're seeing many agencies take those progressive steps towards tribes. But we feel this process, and my apologies, those progressive steps have led to a lot of opportunity, dollars, policy changes and whatnot, and that it's given tribes the opportunity to address those and stand up for those. But in the process of doing that, tribes are very inundated with this consultation process. And I feel that there's priority levels for these that could probably be addressed, like where the dollars are at, where the policy changes are happening. And I'm not disregarding this process, but it is rushed, in my opinion. And I feel that not all the tribes have been given the opportunity to really understand what the possible guidance process means, or even what the readjustment of the allocation means. I feel this could have waited another year or two out, especially after COVID ended, to allow us to really sit in person and develop these processes. But it kind of goes back to the overcomplication of things that I feel that is happening. I feel this allocation and guidance step is overtly complicated, when I feel the real answer is stated before, like by Nathan, would be to just increase the funding and meet the inflation adjustment. As stated before, GAP has been very far behind in the inflation rate, meaning that tribes have been working harder and more for less money. And it's been counterproductive, essentially, for the tribes to really continue to do the work properly. That GAP has allowed us to build our capacity, to develop our resources. And I'm happy to see that there is, steps taken towards it, towards this allocation process and GAP guidance process. But I feel it's overtly rushed. And I just open it up to that. And I know you guys have heard me say this before, but I appreciate you guys listening and taking the time to understand what that means. And I will continue to repeat it, though. We feel that we don't want to see anything happen to tribes or even the consortias. We don't feel there's any real need and adjustment, other than the fact that tribes and consortias need the dollars and to adjust with the current inflation rate. Other than that, I think it would solve everything. I think you'd see many tribes across the nation be happy with that, as we're all competing for those resources. So thank you for taking the time to listen to me, and just open it back up to questions, or if you guys had any comments.
Maybe if I could begin the comment. So, and again, thank you for the opportunity to meet individually with the Tlingit and Haida tribe a week or two ago, and for raising this again in the larger audience, because I think it's an important discussion, as Joanne mentioned in her remarks, that we want to hear, from you in terms of your concerns. So again, thank you for the opportunity, but I do want to reiterate what I said to you in the individual consultation we had with the Tlingit and Haida tribe, and that it is not the intent of OIDA or for EPA to reduce the funds available, the base funds available to tribes. We agree with the comment that was made in the chat box that the GAP program actually needs to increase in terms of resources that are available to the tribes, not only just in general because of the increasing demands that you and other tribes have in terms of your public health and environmental needs, but we also recognize in the last two years what COVID has resulted in terms of additional hardship to tribal nations. So again, I just want to repeat that it's not our intent. We in fact want to ensure that we're protecting not only the baseline funding, but finding ways that we can in fact look at more available resources and more available flexibility. How we get there, I guess, is the question. and I understand your concerns in terms of the process. And so with that, I'm going to turn to Joanne and Lisa, who are more involved with the process, but I wanted to make it very clear to everyone that that is not our intent.
Ms. Chase.
Thank you, Raymond, and thanks, Jane, too. I think we all share where Jane is coming from too, and so I'll take it just a step further. My dad, who's just a real role model in my life, used to say something really important to me, and I used to say, well, Dad, I didn't mean for that to happen. Dad, I didn't intend for that to happen. My dad used to say, well, honey, the highway to hell is paved with good intentions, right? So good intentions are only half of our equation here. It's actually the result. And so if our point of departure is positive intentions, that's really important. And it is and has been our point of departure. And I truly believe, Raymond, I so appreciate what you're saying. And I have appreciated our relationship over the years and our ability to have, these kinds of conversations. And I really do hear what you're saying. And I appreciate it very, very much. And so I believe that, Jane said no harm done, that baseline funding won't be touched. And I think at the end of the day, when we finish our conversations and we have an opportunity to maybe dispel with some of the misinformation that may be circulating, when we can actually run the numbers with you all and really walk through in detail what this looks like, we'll actually see more resources going to the tribes, not just because there's a slight increase in the appropriation dollars, but also because our process is streamlined in a way that ensures that we're maximizing, optimizing those resources, getting to the tribes in the most effective way. That is our commitment. That is what I believe truly our end result will show, and that we really are committed to that process of working with you so that there is a collective and mutual understanding, and that, yes, the intentions are really important, and they, with this administration in particular, are absolutely positive intentions. But most important, it is that the results are positive results. So, and then Raymond, just to hear you on process, I'm with you, and I have to just be honest, and Jane and Lisa know this, and folks have heard me say this. It's tough. This is a tough one because COVID has wreaked havoc in our communities. It's wreaked havoc in our nation. Frankly, it's wreaked havoc in the world, right? And so it is hard to sort of get back and process all of this. And there's multiple layers of consultation, not just with EPA issues, with a host of other, federal agencies, as I alluded to, even in making remarks. And so, this will feel rushed. I have a feeling, Raymond, honestly, that it would feel rushed under any circumstance because it's huge. It's a lot of big movement. And so I very much appreciate what you're saying. We will continue to try to keep that at the forefront of how we are moving forward. And again, part of that, I think, helping to ease that burden of feeling rushed is ensuring that we are really having a inclusive, transparent process here. And so, and yet there are also very justifiable reasons for needing to move forward on a timeline. And part of that is the commitment to the end result that gets the most resources to the tribes in the most efficient way. So I appreciate and really take to heart what you're saying. And Lisa may have some additional details just to add to our process, or may not. That may be more appropriate for our Friday conversation. I'm not sure, Lisa, if you wanted to add to that, and we can get on to some other questions too. But I'll turn it to Lisa if she has anything to add to that. And let me just, I also just want to, I'll only say this, it's just delightful. I mean, we are all really well served to be working with Lisa and her team. And they just have been committed to a really super process. So I want to acknowledge Lisa's leadership and her responsiveness to the individual questions, to the collective questions, to, again, kind of leading our efforts in moving through this circumstance, which is complicated. I don't want to say troubled waters, but I will say complicated landscape. But again, just feeling that with Lisa and her team and the work that we're doing and the overall commitment of Administrator Regan and the Biden administration and Jane's leadership of the Office of International and Tribal Affairs, that we will land. We won't end. We'll land in a place of new departure that I think will be embraced by the tribe. So with that, sorry, Lisa, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I have nothing additional to add, Joanne, and thank you for your kind words.
Not to inundate you all again with this, but one thing I really wanted to add with this concern, and I appreciate you guys taking the time to listen. I'm hoping while listening and understanding where I'm coming from, and not just me, but other tribes as well, that is really taken into consideration. And the one thing I really want to touch on too is in this process, I'm hoping that consortia don't get touched as well. As you know, in Alaska, there are many consortia that really help the tribes with their lack of capacity or the lack of the resources. So it'd be very impactful if anything were to happen to these consortia. I'm hoping again that, you know, at this point, and I'm going to make this recommendation, that we don't take any action right now and come back again after COVID. We're towards the end of it right now. And you did mention that no matter what, it's going to be a rush process. You know, tribes are always going to be inundated and stuff, but this really could be an actual time to really have an enduring sit down face to face to really understand where people are coming. I don't think we really got that during these virtual meetings. Granted, right now, I mean, we're having an impactful conversation, but it's not the same as being in person. And I'm hoping that can really take into consideration. Maybe, you know, the thought could be, let's leave as is and revisit this and sit back down and bring the tribes back in again in that process you guys did back in the fall to really get an understanding what these processes and these new policies could mean for us. I don't think that really was able to come across, but I think the approach was great. We've not ever seen that before. So that's something that was really cool to have. You know, I think when Lisa offered this back in, I think it was September, you know, we had a couple folks being able to sit in. Miranda Hom, one of the new RTOC members, was able to sit in on that and give some input as well. But I think we need to have a more in-depth conversation on that, and then really start looking at what a real good allocation and guidance process could be. And it's not to discredit you guys and the hard work you're doing, but it's to really ensure that there is proper transparency and real consultation behind it. I don't mean to beat you guys over the head with that constantly, but I feel it's just important and imperative to really get that understanding behind it. And thank you for listening.
And thank you. And I believe, and Lisa will correct me, we are going to be going out again for consultation. So the dialogue is still continuing. And I'm glad that you found the dialogue that we began last year was a productive one. What I'm hearing from you, it shouldn't end. And I think we are going to continue that dialogue. But having said that, at some point, we're going to have to make a decision. It may not satisfy everyone, but as Joanne says, we want to be as transparent and inclusive with you as we go through the decision-making process.
Thank you, Jane. We have about 6 minutes before the timeline ends. Are you guys open for some comments still in the chat and questions?
Oh, sure.
Thank you, guys. I'm reading. Okay, Michael Opheim says that with renewed interest in the GAP guidance, will the Alaska tribes be recognized in it this time around? I think currently that tribes are still always recognized in this GAP. So, but the concern right now would be that in this reallocation process, it's possible that tribes could be left out. Granted, that's not what's going to happen, but there is the consideration. So Michael, right now, we're always still recognized, and that's there.
Yeah. I appreciate that point, Raymond, and you know, yes, you know, Alaska tribes are recognized, and as we said, no harm. You know, there will be no harm done. The baseline, we're absolutely committed to maintaining that, and so that recognition of the Alaska tribal governments is part of our foundation, and it will continue to be part of the foundation as we build forward.
Right. Thank you. Is EPA planning, Tom Schlosser says, is EPA planning to issue guidance on when EPA will notify tribes of a permit that may affect tribes' water quality standards? under sections 401A2. There are recent Fond du Lac case, there's a recent Fond du Lac case about this that shows a need for policy. I hope I made that clear. Sorry.
Jane may have some insight.
Yeah, so if I understood the question properly, and correct me if I didn't understand it, the question had to do with consultation with regards to a permit issue, particularly with regards to water quality standards. And yes, in fact, some of us were on a call earlier with our colleagues in the Office of Water about the need for tribal consultation as it affects water quality standards, and particularly as it affects tribal reserve rights. So if I understood the question correctly, which was a permitting water quality question.
Thank you, Jane. I see I have one more question in the comment section and then a hand raised. This one in the comment comes first though. I just heard from Kowarek yesterday that there is discussion of removing consortia from IGAP. Is that true? They host a regional backhaul program that has been developed for the last decade. And that is the run via gap. So that would be a huge issue if that were to remove. And it kind of touches on what I was saying though too. You know, consortiums have been really there for the capacity needs for tribes that just don't have it. So again, we hope nothing changes in regards to gap allocation. Back to that question.
So Raymond, would you just, this first part, there was a very direct question in the first
Sure.
part.
Sure.
It was.
So Trish says, I just heard from Kowarek yesterday that there is a discussion of removing consortia from IGAP. Is that true?
So let me hit the broader section, and then maybe Lisa can provide a little bit more insight too. And so, so there is a question on how we engage consortia. There's not a question on removing consortia from necessarily, so the idea of zeroing out, for example, is not an idea that's on the table by any means. There is a live and important discussion on how resources are accounted for by consortia, how we engage with consortia, and that's a real and necessary question and discussion that we're having. But it is not a question of removing consortia, zeroing out consortia, but rather ensuring that the resources that are being allocated really are going to the tribes in the most efficient and the most effective and most direct way possible. That's kind of the parameter. I don't know, Lisa, if you have detail to add to that. And then Raymond, again, just to remind folks, we'll have some time to actually really kind of get into a more detailed back and forth on this on Friday, is it? I can't remember when it's on the agenda, but I know there's another session scheduled specifically on this issue. But Lisa, do you have anything to add to that?
I would add, in the guidance, we're working on revisions now. I'm going through the comments from regions and programs, and intertribal consortia are still very relevant and included, and eligible applicants and recipients in the GAP program.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. So I know we're running out of time, but I have one more question with the hand raise, and then I'd like to end with one of our RTOC representatives addressing you guys, Sean Larson. So with that, first, I'd like to acknowledge Linda Storm.
Good morning. Hi, excuse me. I raised my hand
Linda.
because, hi, Joanne.
Good to see you.
It's an honor to be here today. I wanted to add to what Ms. Nishida said in response to Tom Slosher's question. I serve as the regional lead for 401 water quality certifications in Indian Country for Region 10. And one of my roles as the point of contact for non-EPA federal permits is the 401A2 process that may affect water quality of neighboring jurisdictions including tribes with treatment as a state and 401 authority. So in response to Tom's question, the Fond du Lac case ruled that EPA had a responsibility to conduct this may affect process for federal permits and licenses, including U.S. Army Corps of Engineers permits. It's a very important case. Currently, the Clean Water Act Section 401 rule is in the process of changing. There was a regulation that came out in 2020. It was vacated in October of 2021. Now we're back to the prior regulations, and the agency is undergoing development of a new rule, which I understand will be published as a draft in the Federal Register in the next month or so. And it will address this as well as many parts of 401. 401A2 is the process whereby EPA has the responsibility when a federal permit or license is issued and a water quality certification is issued, is to look at that and see whether the project as conditioned by one certifying authority may affect another certifying authority or neighboring jurisdiction's water quality. So his question was, will guidance be forthcoming on this in terms of how EPA will notify tribes? What I want to say is I don't know the answer to that. But what I do know is that currently the definition of tribes for whom notification would occur are tribes that have treatment as a state for water quality standards and 401 authority. That question may be broadened in the new proposed rule. Should it be a broader scope of tribal tribes that should be contacted? And currently EPA has the discretion to do a may affect determination or not. What I do is if I see a project that raises red flags that it could cause or contribute to water quality violations of a neighboring jurisdiction, is we would reach out to that neighboring jurisdiction. We would ask for their input informally, and then we would send a formal letter with a may affect determination. We don't have to do that informal step, but that's generally what we would do. So that's it in a nutshell. It's a little bit complex and I'm kind of in the weeds on it. So just wanted to answer that.
Linda.
No, thank you, Linda. That was very helpful, because in the discussion that we had with our colleagues in the Office of Water, it was more general. It wasn't specific to 401A2. And so having this granularity helps us, because we didn't specifically ask about or talk about the may determine. It was more in general. So if there is anything additional, certainly Joanne and I will follow up with our Office of Water to try to get the answer that you and Tom just raised. Thank you.
I can post the contacts in the chat. Lauren Kasparik and Emma Mashal are the staff leads, and then Brian Fraser and Russ Kaiser are the managerial leads. So,
Thank you. Thanks so much, Linda.
welcome.
Thank you, Linda. And again, I want to acknowledge that we are a little over time, and I want to thank you both, or thank you all for spending some time with us to sit down. It's really refreshing to have essentially leadership sit down with this many people involved in TELS right now. So with that, I know we're running out of time, but I wanted to give Shauna Larson, another RTOC representative, a chance to finish out. Shauna?
Thank you, Ray. And Saridat Chamakat Shauna Larson, Sukhbia on my mom's side from the village of Palawick, also known as Port Graham. And I'm on my dad's side from the village of Nidiniana, also known as Chickaloon Village. And I just, it's been a real honor to be here. I've been very excited to come in person, and it just has felt really nice to be able to gather and address these issues. And I think coming together with other Indigenous people and thinking about these things sort of sparked me to, remember all the things that and all the work that the RTOC has done and the NTOC over the last 30 years. I started doing this work when I was about 19. I started working for International Indian Treaty Council. I did not go to college. I was 19 years old, and it was 1992. And when I graduated, my mother-in-law at the time hired me on at International Indian Treaty Council, and they were working very much on the UN Declaration for the Rights of Indigenous People. And through that position, she introduced me to people like Tom Goldtooth and Jean Gamache, Bobby Andrews, Sarah James, Lydia Olympic, Jimbo Simmons, Tony Gonzalez, Floyd Westerman, Jim Main, Dr. Bullard, Richard Moore, Jackie Warlito, Billy Frank. I had the opportunity to meet all these amazing leaders back then. And it was during that time that the NEJAC was being formed. And it was just at the beginning of the RTOC. And I don't think I really realized that coming on at that age, that the IGAP and the RTOC were very new. So I went to a lot of those meetings. I worked for an environmental nonprofit, and a big part of my job was to infiltrate all government meetings and basically raise heck. That was my job. And
Good job.
so that was just my job. And so I did that work for a long time, and I was raised with the idea and mentality of fighting for the rights of our people. But I think the one thing that I try to remember is that for the last 30 years, we have been trying, as Indigenous people who have our original instructions, we know why we're here. We know what we're supposed to be doing. Our stories tell us what we're supposed to be doing and how we're supposed to do it. And it isn't our right, but it's our responsibility. And we have to pass that responsibility on to our future generations. And I was really excited about the theme of remembering forward and our original guardians, because I think those things really point to the idea of our original instructions. But for the last 30 years, we've been having meetings like these, which are always good and always insightful and always informative. We've been having meetings like these and talking together without always directly addressing the fact that we're still trying to figure out how to combine regulations and laws with our original instructions from the Creator. And the truth of the matter is, something we've always known and that our elders have told us is that you can't do those things because they're coming from two completely different mindsets. And so I think I just like to remember, because we are excited and happy to have new administrations come in and do the work, but it's always good to remember that, you know, as tribal governments, we've had to survive for a very long time, you know, starting from 1492. EPA came along, obviously, in 1970. In you know, that Alaska as a state was a territory, and then we were voted on to become a state. And I think most people thought that with the Suffrage Act and 1924, the women's right to vote, that made it so that everybody could vote. But there was an English only writing and speaking clause in the Alaska Constitution until 1970. And so until 1970, Alaska Native people did not have full voting rights. And so thinking about that, and then remembering that we've had to survive Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden, and every time a new administration comes in, we hear these cool things like, we're going to really look at that. We're going to visit this. We're going to meet. We're going to review. We're going to propose. We're going to address. We're going to develop referral. You know, we hear all these really cool things, but in the end, we know as Indigenous people what our original instructions are. And I always just thought, as a young person coming in, looking with new eyes and having a daughter, a young 2-year-old daughter, that if I could just articulate well enough, if I could just articulate, I thought I could lean on the federal government workers' empathy. You know, there had to be some champions in there, I thought. And what I've realized is that no matter how we try to articulate it, that our original instructions will never coincide with laws and regulations. And it's our original instructions to take care of the things around us, because those are the things that take care of us. And so I love hearing things like traditional ecological knowledge, which refer to things like our traditional ways of knowing, but it just really talks about, you know, time immemorial, where we have always been from these lands. We know these lands. We know what needs to be done in order to protect our lands and our people and our future generations and our elders. And so I just always want to remind us of where we've been. Where did we come from? You know, even thinking back to the Papal Bulls and how it was that we came to the place to do this work that we're doing today. And not to be somber, but just in the spirit of remembering forward and our original guardians, to always remember that we're having great discussions, but our end goal is to work on something very difficult, which is try to figure out how to help. As Indigenous people, I feel like we're always trying to help other people figure out ways to help themselves. We know what the original instructions are. We know how it works. We know what we're supposed to do. So let us help you, help us help you in sharing those instructions and making a path for us to be able to all walk together forward. Thanks.
Appreciate that, those comments.
If I could just say thank you, Shauna, you were much too modest. I mean, you are very articulate and inspiring. And I know that Joanne mentioned that she likes to refer to us getting into good trouble. And I just want to thank you for reminding us that we all need to work together to get into good trouble. And more importantly, as you say, to help us remember forward and to remember also the original instructions that you and the other people in this room today need to guide us at EPA. We will try to do our best, but we're imperfect. And so that's why these dialogues are so important, so that we can all get in good trouble together in terms of remembering the original instructions that you need us to honor and to respect. So thank you.
And Sean, if I may, just to echo Jane's sentiments too, but also just to thank you. I think, you know, one of the great gifts of this job opportunity that I have is often to be reminded of the purpose of ultimate purpose of the work, right? And so the names that you called, I think back to the days of even my opportunities as a young person to work with Roxanne and others at the Treaty Council. Those names that you called, so many of them I too had the privilege of knowing and you know, remembering forward and remembering to draw on their spirit to guide us. I just really want to say thank you. I mean, you get caught up in the moment of the day, and you're right, it's two different worlds and two different places, and you know, kind of lean into the bureaucracy of the day and all the things that we want to accomplish. But you know, you just really help to bring it back to that fundamental place of remembering forward and drawing on the spirits of those who've come before us and who guide us, and all those who came centuries and centuries before them, and really why we do this work that we do. And so thank you for, for that, and for helping to ground all of us in the work that we do, and taking us to that place where we are indeed connected and reminded of why we do what we do. And so again, the gift of this job is to continue to learn every day and every moment. And so thank you for that. And thank you, Raymond, for this opportunity. And to all of you, it is indeed just a real honor to work with you. And there are challenges, and there are conflicting worldviews, and there are conflicting universes. But I do know that if we continue to work together in the spirit that we are, that we can make a difference for leaning on those generations before us. We can make a difference for the people today and for those generations to come in a good way. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. And thank you, Jane, and to all the comments and questions in the chat. We've gone over about 15 minutes of time, but that just kind of shows that, having these discussions with leadership is insanely important. And I appreciate you guys taking the time, going past the schedule as well, and listening to the comments. And I know it's a little bit repetitive in what I'm saying and what some of the people have for concern. We really hope that can be just taken into account of what we've been saying. With that, I want to thank you guys and turn it over to our moderator so we can get into our next session. We have a packed agenda, as you guys have seen. We welcome you guys to stay on and look forward to the next discussion we have later this week. But it's been great. Thank you, guys.
Raymond, thank you. And I know that Jane and I would both love to stay on, but Jane and I are going to jump because we have the privilege now of engaging with the National Tribal Caucus in their monthly meeting. So we're going to join them. But again, thank you for this privilege. And we'll look forward maybe to popping in on a couple sessions as the week goes on.
Look forward to it.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Ashish.
Thank you.